someone who's looking at a business for the first time ever, like if they're looking at a laundromat or a dry cleaning business or a restaurant or any kind of business, really, it may be the first time that they look at that kind of business, but we've looked at dozens or hundreds. And so we can move through the process very quickly. People only pay for what can be demonstrated. And so, our advice to that guy was if you can wait 2 years to sell, make these changes, improve the profitability, you will ultimately end up with a higher selling price. And bonus, you get to enjoy the added earnings over the course of that period of time. At the end of the day, the big litmus test that I always say people should be asking is, what are the different fees I'm going to pay and what should I be getting for that money?
Right.
What will I get for that money?
Welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast, where you can escape the corporate trap through franchise ownership. Here's your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, the franchise guide.
Welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, your franchise guide, the show where we help corporate executives experience time and financial freedom. A very exciting show for you today. You had asked for more guests, for more content and different directions, and we listened. We got your messages. I have my good friend. We've known each other since, I believe, 2020, where we exchanged some podcasts. David C. Barnett. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, Giuseppe, it's good to be here again. Thanks so much for having me back. I'm happy to talk with you today.
Yep, I screwed up, and I will admit that in the very beginning here. And I think last time we spoke, it was Q4 of last year, and you were a four-timer. This, I believe, is your fifth time, and I forgot the SNL robe. So that was the promise I made to you. So we owe you a robe. So I am going to be traveling, so I may have to steal one from the hotel when we're out there. But no, I really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to the show. And you reached out to me and said had a new book going live. I was super excited to have you on. So thanks again. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no problem.
So for those that maybe I was told once before that when someone sometimes listens to the show, they may only go back a few episodes. And we've done some great shows. One in particular around exit strategy planning, which was probably our top 5 show on that topic, number 1 show, and we've definitely sent that out. If you could give the audience maybe a little bit of background of who David is and who you serve and who you help, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, so I'm a former business broker. So I've had several careers in sales and advertising. I've been working with small businesses since the 1990s, basically, and I spent a few years as a business broker. And business brokerage is a really tough business because basically you get paid when you sell a business for someone, you get a commission, and you can go for months and months between deals. And so there was a lot of ups and downs, sort of a cash flow roller coaster. I eventually decided it wasn't suitable for me because I had 2 young children at home. And I went back into the workforce and took a job with a bank. A few years later, the bank reorganized and I ended up starting the business that I have today, which now we're talking still over 10 years ago. Basically working with business owners and people that want to buy businesses, doing many of the things that business brokers do, but with a very different kind of business model. So today I work with buyers and sellers as a consultant, and we basically have broken down the process of buying or selling a business into steps, and people can work with us for whichever steps that they want. So for example, with sellers, what we do is we do an evaluation on their business and show them what they likely are going to be able to sell their business for. And for some people, they stop right there because maybe they've already identified a buyer and they just needed something to help guide the conversation with that person. For people that want to talk with new people, we'll then create we'll do what we call the packaging. So we'll create a business profile, or some people call it a SIM, which is a buyer-facing document that talks about the business, shows different, financial performance exhibits, that type of thing. And then some people end right there. Others want us to help them find the buyer. So we will run an advertising campaign online, much the same way the business brokers do. And we use the same websites like BizBuySell, for example. And we filter the inquiries that people send in looking for information on the business. We get the prospective buyer to fill out the NDA, et cetera. And we help the seller manage the process. But we don't act as a broker in any of this. We just charge for each step along the way. And when the business owner finally does sell the business, they sell it on their own with our help. There's no commission or anything like that. So it's a very different kind of business model. And we do the same sort of thing with buyers where we help them look at businesses and help them analyze deals, et cetera. And it works very well.
That's awesome. So done with you type of system, right? It's a team approach as opposed to here's the listing to the broker, you find the buyers, and when you do, we'll sit down and talk with them. And
Yeah, absolutely.
have you seen, and you don't have to give specifics, but is it a package? You're doing it. Is this hourly? Is this just you charge a flat fee for the step? And have you seen a significant savings, for someone looking to sell? I think a traditional broker maybe charges about 10%.
Yeah, so the way that our pricing works is we charged fixed fees for each of these different steps, and we
Okay.
have slightly different fee structure depending on the size of the business. So people know that when they, for example, if they want us to do the evaluation, if they're a business owner and they want to sell one day, we tell them up front, this is what the cost is. And so then we go
Mm.
through the project and we meet with them, we give them the report, we review it with them. They know what they're paying. For people who have never engaged with a consultant before, when they hear an hourly rate, they get a little bit fearful that, is this going to take 10 hours or 30 hours?
Right.
Like, how many hours am I going to be billed for? And so we've tried to adopt the fixed price model so that people know exactly what they're getting into. The buyers especially like it because buyers, really often don't have any experience working with consultants. So we can show them, here's what we charge to do an analysis on this project. Most of our analysis projects for buyers, for example, are up to just a couple $1,000s, and
Yeah.
some of them are even under. And so it's not a lot of money, and the reason why we're able to do these projects so inexpensively is that we've done hundreds of them. So someone who's looking at a business for the first time ever, like if they're looking at a laundromat or a dry cleaning business or a restaurant or any kind of business really, it may be the first time that they look at that kind of business, but we've looked at dozens or hundreds. And so we can move through the process very quickly. That's what makes us efficient. That's what makes it economical for people to use our service.
Love that. And you're my go-to. So we've sent the show out. Have referred you over the years because I really like that approach. It's a lot cleaner. People know what they're getting into. If listeners are listening in, whether you're watching or listening just to the audio, you'll notice David has a slight accent, and David is out of Canada. So the question that comes up is, can you work with anyone? A lot of the audience is listening from the United States. So my understanding is you really can help anyone, right? Canada.
About three-quarters of our clientele is in the States, yeah. So we work with people all over the place, and my training and background was learned from American instructors. So, I got my initial training through a big franchise in the business brokerage world, and I went through a certification program from the IBBA, which is based in the US. And so that's where my training is from. And yeah, I live in Canada, but we work with American clients all the time and people in other countries as well. So it really, we're not giving people advice on a clause in a contract. People who are going to do one of these transactions, they are going to need the help of a CPA and an attorney
Right.
to get these deals done. And one of the advantages that we bring is that we've been through this so many times with different people. The conversations that I will have with someone is not, what needs to be changed in a contract. It will be, here are the things you need to talk about with your attorney to make sure are talked about and they're considered in the final paperwork that your attorney puts together for you. So I kind of give people a heads up of what to expect, what kinds of conversations they need to have, what sorts of things they need to look out for, and the final details of that, and creating a document or getting advice on how to plan your new entity for the acquisition, for example. I mean, that's going to come from your CPA. So it doesn't remove the necessity for those other players on your team, but I would argue I help people get through those conversations more quickly.
I love that. And one experience, I had referred someone to you, became a good friend over the years, wanting to sell. You go to a traditional broker. Great. What's it worth? Let's sell it. You asked the question, why do you want to sell it? I think in that one particular case, that gentleman was working too many hours, and you said, well, why are you working those hours? Why are you doing these tasks? And you were able to give them some feedback into maybe keeping the business. Maybe there wasn't a need to really sell the business, but it was because you were making money. They enjoyed the business, just the hours were out of hand, and just reworking the team. I think you had changed some roles, had to make an additional hire. So that's the other value. You may think you want to sell, but maybe you just need that coach or that consultant, I should say, to really kind of walk you through that process. And that was super helpful. So
Well, you raise an interesting point. Like a lot of the times when we work with business sellers, one of the questions we ask is about their timeline.
Right.
Because when we do the evaluation, we often are able to identify sort of low hanging fruit or problems with the business that could be addressed that would really enhance the value.
Yeah.
So it's pretty normal for us to have a meeting with someone. This happened just the other day. We were reviewing an analysis, what we call an MPSP, most probable selling price analysis, with a client, and we showed them that the industry average gross margin for their business was a certain amount,
Mhm.
like 43%, and theirs was only 37. And we said, this means either your inputs are too expensive, you're paying too much for your stuff that goes into each project, or your pricing is off, one of the two. And then he kind of, developed a little smirk on his face. And I said, if your pricing was in line with industry or your costs were in line with industry and you were getting the proper gross margin, this extra 6 points would be on the bottom line.
Wow.
That would mean that your profit would be this amount, and this would have this impact on your business profitability. He knew he was underpricing. He knew that he wasn't as aggressive as he should have been. He knew that other people were charging more. And I don't think he really understood what it was costing him.
Mm.
Because when it comes to selling a business, it's what results can you demonstrate to someone? You can't sell a business to someone saying, "Hey, if you own this business, you can make more money because I don't charge enough." Everyone's going to be like, "Yeah, sure, buddy."
Mhm.
If you could have been making more money, you would have
You
been
would've.
making more money.
Mhm.
People only pay for what can be demonstrated. And so, our advice to that guy was, if you can wait 2 years to sell, make these changes, improve the profitability, you will ultimately end up with a higher selling price. And bonus, you get to enjoy the added earnings over the course of that period of time.
Right.
So, to be able to give someone some real input into exactly what the problem may be with the way they're running their business is something that we really look forward to when we can do it. It requires a time horizon, though. We have to have people reach out to us and start working with us well before they get to the point where they need to sell tomorrow.
Correct.
You know,
Yes.
because when you're at that point, then your options are far more limited.
Yeah. The story I always tell, the very short story I always tell, is when I signed my first franchise, I cut the check, shook the hand of the franchisor, and he asked me point blank, "What questions do you have?" And I said, "How do I sell this thing?" So that was my exit strategy, right? It was within 1 minute of signing the agreement. You're always thinking of that because is it the scale and sell in 5 years? You're building a legacy, maybe passing it down to the kids. Things change, right? The kids may not want the business. They may not want to be involved. Or as you mentioned, before you want to sell, you need to start preparing. And now is the time, not, when you're ready to sell. So that's a very, very good point. Last piece, and I wanted to switch gears here a little bit and talk about the new book. Where does someone start? So they're not sure, kind of, I want to sell. Maybe they'll listen to the show. Maybe I don't want to sell. I need some coaching and consulting, and they don't know what service. So where is the website they should go to, and what do you recommend as kind of a first step?
So, in fact, one of the, we're going to talk today about the book that I wrote 10 years ago that I've recently updated.
Mhm.
There's another one actually, how to sell my own business.com, which has also been recently updated. You can find that on Kindle or paperback from Amazon. But if you go to the website, how to sell my own business.com, you'll be able to download a free copy of that as a PDF. And it's been completely updated for 2025. And it explains the whole process of what is going to happen, what the different steps are. And then there's another sort of book within that new edition, which also gives you a bunch of considerations to apply to your own business to prepare you to actually do a transaction. So kind of a to-do list to make sure that you're in fact ready to sell. So I would recommend people get that. There's also my YouTube channel. I've got hundreds of videos out there about deal making. So if somebody just has an interest in this idea of buying or selling businesses and they want to learn more about it, just look up David Barnett, YouTube, or any of the podcasting platforms. You'll find me right away. David Barnett Small Business maybe would be your search. And you can start to absorb some of that content. But if someone wants to learn about selling a business, go to howtosellmyownbusiness.com, download the book, or if you prefer a paperback, you can get it on Amazon. Also available in the second edition that's just been updated.
Awesome. And we'll link that in the show notes. That's a great first starting place. And I get that question all the time. Where do I start? Or what should I think about? And that's what I tell everyone. Why do you want to sell the business? where are the issues, and then obviously review the book and go down the checklist. So cool. So wanted to switch gears a little bit. So we met, going back probably about 5 years or so. And when I had launched my podcast, and I'll remember right before I'm looking at, the book and franchise warnings. And I'm like, wait a second, what are we talking about today? This crazy guy, David Barnett.
I think you reached out for an interview with me, and then I told you, hey, but do you know I have this book out, Franchise Warnings, right?
That's right. It was our agency at the time. That's right. The agency reached out. I remember them. Great agency. They helped me launch the show back in it was February of 2020. We officially launched right before COVID, so it was kind of actually the perfect time because it was a great way to network with the show. And I'm like, what am I getting myself into? So we laugh about it ever since, but. Great book. It was recently updated. You had reached out. So
Yep.
Tell us about what the book is about and what updates have you included in the new version?
Sure. Well, I first wrote the book in 2015, and I think it's probably I think the third of the different books that I've written, and I was struck by just the fact that there are a lot of books, Giuseppe, about how to pick the right franchise. And I had, over the course of my career as a business broker and just in life in general, meeting other people doing business, I'd run into people who've had difficulties before in the world of franchising.
Mhm.
And I asked myself, where is the book talking about the other side of the coin? Because we've got all of these books about, how to pick a franchise or why you want to have a franchise and all these types of things. But who's telling people about what can go wrong and what kinds of conversations need to be had with franchisors and with other franchisees when you're exploring these opportunities? And so I thought maybe I can make some kind of quick download ebook kind of thing. Well, it quickly grew as I thought about the different situations I'd helped people through. All this times I helped people try to resell a franchise and had franchisors do things that weren't really in the interest of the franchisee. And the stories just started to pile up. I, started writing and eventually ended up with a book. And so just like the title says, Franchise Warnings, I take people through what can go wrong with the franchise business model and what kinds of things need to be looked out for, what sort of conversations you need to have, because people that are in the promotional space for franchises, obviously tend to talk about what's great about a franchise. And they're not talking so much about what may go wrong for someone. So that's the whole purpose of the book. You read through it. I mean, of the different things that I talk about in the book, how many of them have you run into that have actually been things that you've seen people have difficulty with?
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how what I feel is common sense. Yes, I'm a franchise coach and consultant, and I'm like, well, this should be kind of standard. But I've talked to people and over the years, and like, yeah, I bought a franchise. I don't know if it's for me. I lost money, and blah blah blah, and they kind of gave me the reasons. So I asked them, did you find it on your own? Yes. How many so for the example, validation. How many franchisees did you speak with? I didn't speak with any. And I'm like, you didn't. The franchisor is putting, obviously they're going to put their best foot forward, but also understanding this is a 5 to 20 year, typically 10-year, 5 to 20 year relationship. This is a marriage, but they didn't introduce you to any franchisees. You didn't ask to speak. No, I just decided, yeah, I'm going to make that decision and move forward. Those franchisees are going to give you the good, the bad, and everything in between. You need to dive deeper. You need to ask them, if it was bad, did it get fixed? If it didn't get fixed, it's a continuing issue. You should bring that up to the franchisor. But you nailed it. The book is 100% accurate. The book really is not about is franchising good or bad. Every franchise is completely different in how they run their business. Some their sales cycle is much faster. Others will really have these things in place to help you do your due diligence. But yeah, it's very, very accurate. It's dead on. And when you're doing your due diligence, don't rush the process. And that's where I help also people, is walking them through. Hey, we know we told you to do your validation call. Did you do them? And how many did you do? Well, I did one. Well, you may want to line up another 4 or 5. You want to talk to the new guys. You want to talk to the guys that were in business for 5 or 10 years and everyone else in between. So
I think that point you just made is really important, because people, if you talk to someone who's just been in the system for a year, they might be in a little bit of a honeymoon phase.
Right.
But if you talk
Right.
to somebody who's been in the system for 5 years, for example, then you're going to get a different perspective because maybe that person has had an opportunity to come up with some problems or difficulties that they've had to work through with the system. And so what they're going to share about their experience is going to be a little bit different. I also think there's real value in face-to-face
Mm.
conversations versus sort of electronic or telephone conversations. I think that when we are standing in front of each other, we are more apt to be open up and transparent and share things that we may not necessarily want
Agree.
to share, in an email, for example, right? And, especially if the franchisee you're talking to is worried that something that they, disclose might end up being shared with somebody else that could make them look bad.
100%.
Yeah. In the recent updates to the book, I added some new sections. One of the sections was on ethical franchising, which is a conversation that you came and had over on my YouTube channel. And but one of the other things that I wanted to point out is in the book, I also talk about, the different ways that you can compare a franchise opportunity with other kinds of business.
Mhm.
So there's an example in there, for example, of a pizzeria as a franchise resale versus an independent pizzeria, and how, the two different businesses are going to have very different values, how the sort of franchise fees and everything plays
Mhm.
into the valuation formula. And and these are things that I think are just important for people to understand because you are making an investment when you get into one of these things. And at the end of the day, the big litmus test that I always say people should be asking is, what are the different fees I'm going to pay and what should I be getting for that money?
Right.
What will I get for that money? And in some franchise systems, there is tremendous value in that exchange.
Mhm.
And
Agreed.
I'll give you an example. And this is again from an update that we've done to the book, my own franchise experience, because when I was a business broker, I was part of a franchise system. And the way that the franchise was set up is it had a flat monthly licensing fee. And with that membership in the organization, I got access to a whole bunch of services, like basically to these online websites. One of them I mentioned earlier, Biz Buy Sell, but there were a few others as well. And we got access to those websites, and we also got access to a really fantastic CRM.
Mhm.
If I was an independent business broker and I was paying for all those things individually, they would have added up to more than the licensing fee.
Right.
So I actually saved money by being a franchisee versus being an independent business. And so the point of the book is not to say, like you said, that all franchises are bad. It's to get people to
Mhm.
think about in a critical way, how do I analyze this? How do I figure out if this is a good deal for me? I like to point to sort of the large franchisors that are in markets where there's a continuous need for innovation and promotion and things like that.
Mhm.
And when you get into those franchise networks, basically you've got those people at head office who are creating all that stuff. They're thinking, months down the road of what the promotions are going to be. They're creating the advertising and marketing collateral. They're
Mhm.
probably preparing the online campaigns. They're, taking care maybe of the Google AdWords for you locally. They're doing a whole bunch of stuff that independent business owners have to try to carve time out to handle. And when people are busy, people don't. And this is, where a lot of people fall down in independent businesses is they're always busy in their business. And they don't have time to quote unquote work on the business doing these sorts of things. But in a lot of these franchise networks, yeah, there are people at head office doing that sort of thing.
And that's part of, asking. I always call it a speak with the captain steering the ship. I call it the third stage in due diligence, the discovery day, confirmation day. Talk to the captain. Where the hell is this ship going? If they don't give you a clear understanding of where this ship is going, what they're working on, it could be simply nothing. We have everything nailed down and we are focusing on national accounts. Great. Spoke with another brand the other day. We're embracing AI. We're not renting it, we're owning it. So we've invested $1 million in AI. Speaking of which, the transcript from this episode is going to get dumped into our system, which is going to create not just marketing content, but it's going to create content for our technicians when they're out in the field. It's going to be content to respond to customers. So I think you have to be innovative. People that are constantly fighting it, no, I'm going to be old school, I'm not going to embrace AI. That's fine, but there's going to be a massive shift. I'm not saying, there may be some jobs going away, but what are the brands, like especially these home service brands where you really can't outsource cleaning or mosquito spraying or roofing, but what can they do differently? And if AI can help with automating things and hopefully cutting back your expenses, then you really embrace it. But yeah, you want to know what's going on, and if they can't give you that answer, and that's really, a lot of brands I'm finding are the founders are more involved as opposed to waiting until the end, because this is all about the match. So in my opinion, if the founder's on, we have founders that sometimes do all the calls, sometimes they get in the middle. But if the match isn't there, why drag this on until the end, this confirmation discovery day, to find out maybe the match isn't there? Let's find out sooner than later. Or if there is a concern, like, hey, you really need to be an extrovert in sales, but maybe that's someone you hire. Are you open to that? Great. Then we can move forward. So yeah, it's very, very important. There's a difference in telling people what to do. They've read the book. I send videos. I feel like in my years of doing this, there's this enforcement. So did you talk to franchisees? Yes, I talked to one. Talk to another. I feel like there's this constant, like, you have the guide, but let's stay on top of it. Did you talk to enough people? So I think there's a combination play there. Get the book, and then you need that person to constantly remind you. But ask the questions. Don't feel bad. Don't hold back. If a concern comes up, speaking with the franchisee, bring it up. If you don't like the answer, you don't like the direction, no one's tying your hands. No one's telling you have to sign a franchise agreement. You can say, I respectfully walk away. Maybe this isn't the right match for me, and that's okay. It's you made that decision. You did that due diligence. You realized the fit wasn't there for that brand, but maybe you want to look at a different brand in that same industry. So that choice at the end of the day is always yours to make. No one is going to ever force you to sign that agreement, but just get educated, get comfortable before signing. So that's my rant.
So I've got a question for you, Giuseppe. The whole AI and technology adoption and everything like that. I mean, you mentioned just a moment ago roofing, right? And I know that there are roofing franchises out there. Someone on Twitter the other day posted a picture of clearly an AI generated photo of like a mechanical man installing shingles.
Oh, that I
And
haven't seen.
the comment was, this is going to be a long time before we see this. I think the roofing industry is safe from AI. And then some other people started to respond with images of these like shingle installing robots that looked like little crawling, sort of like little John Deere crawling tractor things, but miniature, that are rolling along a roof, nailing down shingles. And I thought, you know what? It's going to happen sooner than we
Very
think.
interesting.
I would imagine that if there's a roofing franchise system, people at head office are going to be better able to coach and guide their franchisees about whether or not a certain machine is a good investment or not. Yeah, ahead with and be a little bit ahead of the curve than just individual roofers maybe being maybe calling upon manufacturers or trying things out on their own. It's
That's a good
like, do you
point.
know anyone who's experimenting with that kind of stuff?
I know we have a power washing company. So on the roofing side, that's actually new to me. So I do not. What I've seen is, and this is still new, power washing, using drone operators to power wash and then automate, where they're cleaning water towers, they're cleaning the roof of a stadium, all the different sports stadiums, and getting ready for the World Cup and the FIFA Cup that we're having right now. So we've seen them use technology, utilizing drone tech. So there are roofing companies that will scan if they know a hailstorm is coming, a tornado. Well, tornado is hard to figure, but on the East Coast, we have our hurricanes. If they know that a certain zip code will be affected, or zip codes being affected, they have drones that will scan all the roofs before and after, which is nice. Saves you the time of
Wow.
getting up on a roof. So it'll do imagery, it'll show, and it's simple, right? This is the before, this is the after. Obviously, this is due to storm damage, easy to submit pictures. They can even do, there's infrared cameras on there, so they maybe the roof looks good, but they can show heat escaping from the roof in certain spots. So yeah, we've seen that technology, and we've seen it with power washing. I've seen that tech there. So it's pretty amazing. Where we've seen a lot of it is, we can have a call center where AI is the first line of defense, and AI can answer 1,000 calls for example, or make 1,000 calls all at the same time. I've heard, crazy numbers like that, cutting down on those payrolls, right? Because it's expensive, right? It's not cheap. Manpower is hard to find. So, and good quality staff. So AI it's consolidating. Unfortunately, I guess unfortunately, depending how you look at it, is definitely taking away some jobs. It's making the franchise owner, the business owner, more efficient. I mean, I utilize AI in my business, and full transparency, we've cut our costs in half. We've automated just the intro process of getting an intro call, and after that, I kill off the AI. I want complete communication between myself and that person. But that's interesting with the roof. I've seen it with cleaning robots, self-cleaning restrooms. So that was pretty interesting. What I will say is the technology is expensive. I guess it's going to be here sooner than we think. But again, this is still new, but where I anticipate the value a franchisor will bring is that they will, number one, know about the technology before anyone else because they have a team that's just dealing with those areas of the business, and economies of scale. If you're a roofer buying one of these machines, it may cost you $100K. But if you're saying, well, I have 500 franchisees nationally, we're all going to buy one. What can you do for us?
Yeah.
Not only can we cut the expense, but we're going to give you some great funding and financing options. So that's what I envision. But again, I could be wrong, but that's what I envision with that technology. Interesting stuff, though. See, I'm learning every day. And that's actually, while we're on that topic, that's part of our trip to Cincinnati on July 14th. We have 125 companies coming out, and that just telling us why we're great, but going into how AI is affecting the industry, not just the business, but the industry of water and smoke mitigation and things like that. So, technology is good. One of your fellow neighbor, Canadian franchisors, they utilize AI, and what they've done is they actually came up with a liquid roof. So maybe not a machine installing it, but they're able, assuming your roof is able to be fixed.
Oh, and they give a coating to the old shingles.
They go in with they can a spray-on coat to match the color and texture of the roof, depending if you have depending on the type of shingle, and then a clear coat finish, and giving you a really nice discount compared to ripping off the roof. And again, it has to be in a state that it could be repaired. Sometimes a few shingles need to be replaced, and that's it. But as long as it's in decent standing, you can extend the life. And we've seen technology come into play where you may be able to do 3 or 4 liquid roofs for the price of one completely brand new installation. So there's a lot of cool stuff out there, really popular with property managers. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So what else in the book? Any other things, kind of standouts that you would recommend someone thinking about buying the book? Maybe they never read the first version.
Yeah, just some updates to case studies. There is new content in there. Like I said, things about my own experience as a franchisee. We do have the new section on ethical franchising, as well as some content relates to FTC inquiries and cases that have happened. Basically highlighting where the problems creep in. What are the things that happen that cause franchisees to want to complain? And again, not all franchises are bad. Not all franchises are good. I think it's important for someone who's going to make an investment decision where they could potentially be taking, their retirement funds or their home equity or something and putting it into a business, that they are informed as to what sorts of things they need to be watching out for or have conversations about.
Right.
And I think that the FTC data was really informative because it kind of shows these are the topics that people are complaining about. And so I was sure to include some of that stuff with the update as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I will say, responsible, ethical franchising has been coming up quite a bit. And I like to, when I work with families, I'll tell them, listen, the franchisor can't tell you the mindset has to be a little bit different. This isn't an ROI. You're looking at investing in Microsoft and it's going to yield me so much, or the S&P 500. This is a business. They're going to give you data on the investment range, but could that number be less or can it be more? Absolutely. During COVID, we saw some certain costs skyrocket. So you're using that previous year's data, understanding where the data ends and where it's renewed. So every year, these agreements are being updated. So franchisor can't tell you, hey, you're going to invest in this business, you're going to make $100K. They're going to give you audited financials. They're going to give you in some cases, averages. In some cases, I've seen a franchisor, which is really cool. list every profit and loss for every single franchisee. I mean, the FDD was literally twice the thickness or length of any other FDD I've seen. But that data is all great. It doesn't guarantee you that you're going to obviously make that. So when you're starting any business, I always say, side of caution, you want to make sure you have that buffer. That business may take a little bit longer. Life gets in the way. Maybe a life event delays the process. But if you're going to buy a franchise, I think the intention there is, go in with an open mind that you're going to follow that system. If you're going to utilize the marketing, it takes a little bit of time. There's going to be a ramp up phase, but stay close to the franchisor, assuming you move forward. Ask for advice, ask for help. Some people don't ask for help right away. That you're paying a royalty. That's the support you're getting. And I'm not saying call and get an instant answer, but stay on top of your main point of contact. They're in it together. They're making money when you're making money. Yes, typically it's a royalty on gross revenue, but they want you to succeed. The worst thing any franchisor wants is a closure or someone failing. Does it happen? Absolutely. Some franchisors don't follow through, and other franchisees sometimes don't, give it 100% of their efforts. So, definitely do your due diligence, but also give it all you got. I always say, don't go in, if this is going to work, go in saying, this is going to work, and I'm going to do everything it takes, whether it's a franchise or a non-franchise business. What would you like to add? Because I'd be curious. I keep saying the same things.
I'd like to reiterate the point you just made about the last thing that a franchisor wants is for a location to close.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually our firm's name is given out to people in 3 specific franchise systems. I've worked with them extensively over the years. When people call head office and they say, I think I'm going to get out, I want to sell or I want to close or something, they give our name out. And it's because they want to get that person help to be able to sell or understand, what their location may really be worth. And if it hasn't been performing well, they want someone who's going to show the person, here's exactly what can be expected if you do try to sell. Because to your point, they do not want the number of locations to go down. This is one of the key things that's in the FDD is they get to show how many locations they have active. And obviously a franchise network that is constantly growing is going to be, a better story for them to be able to share with people than one that is seeing an attrition in the number of locations. And so it's absolutely true that the franchisor wants people to be successful. They want them to be operating for the long haul. That's what is most lucrative for the franchisor. And it's what makes it easier for the franchisor to then expand and recruit new people. So I don't think any franchisor out there signs people up with an intention of having them fail. When you are starting a new location, though, you're starting a new business. Like you've got to get customers who presumably are operating or buying something from other people. And so buying a franchise certainly does make it easier because you're given all the tools, the systems, the processes, the branding, all that kind of thing up front. But it's not without its risks. You still have to get the customers. You still have to reach that break-even point. I think that looking at the experience of other franchisees is very instructive. It is helpful. I kind of like the idea of the franchisor that included everyone's P&L, because I think the one big takeaway people would get from going through that, if they looked at it carefully, is just the variability that's possible.
Right.
That, you can end up with a really spectacular location or one that is struggling. We just don't know. And that, to me, that's really responsible because it's highlighting the fact that small business is a risky endeavor. It is definitely not a risk-free thing to get into.
Absolutely. Yeah. I did not realize that with the franchise companies. That is interesting. And I think that's great. They want you to succeed. And I think it starts with that. It starts with, before even making that decision, going back to responsible and ethical franchising. That conversation is between you and the franchisor. And to your point, they want to set everyone up for success. So on the franchisor side, if they don't feel the fit's there, or they feel it's there, but they're like, man, you really got to be selling and you never sold a thing in your life, this is going to be a struggle. These are our thoughts. We can make it work, but you're going to need some assistance with maybe a seasoned salesperson. Are you okay with that? Can the franchisor approve you and then you decide not to hire that salesperson? Absolutely. Will you struggle? More than likely. But ultimately, it's a business. You're not an employee. They can't force your hand, obviously, in hiring that individual. In some cases, they may say, well, in order to come to training, You need to bring the general manager running the business with you. So there will be some requirements. These are not surprises. These are things that will be discussed well ahead of time. But ultimately, it's up to you to execute on that blueprint. I do get some very disturbing questions. I had a call the other day that said, I heard on a show or somewhere, maybe it was on YouTube, that you can't lose money with a franchise. And I go, I mean, really? I mean, what is a franchise? It's a business. And I go, honestly, if that were the case, we wouldn't be talking right now. I would buy every damn franchise out there. And I said that jokingly. It was a younger guy.
Listen, Giuseppe, if that were the case, the banks would open all the
Yes,
franchises
right.
because they already have the money.
Right.
And if they were convinced it was risk-free, that's what they would do with their money. Yeah, there certainly is risk. In the new edition of the book, there's actually a chapter there. I don't know if you took a look at it. It's my advice to franchisors, where I give some feedback and advice to people that run franchise systems. And I say, like, here are some of the things that you should be looking at in functioning better or being better able to show people that you are one of the people that is actually taking these concerns into a consideration, and you're trying to do the best you can at I don't know if it's doing the best at creating a good opportunity for people, but doing the best at finding the right people for the opportunity. As you know, the fit between the individual and the business is really important. And if
Yep.
the difference between success and failure is a sales effort and the sales skills of an owner, and in all likelihood at the beginning when you're starting off, the owner will be the only salesperson. Then, for example, that skill set, those traits have got to be at the top of the list of who's going to get into that opportunity. So to me, the fit has got to be the number one thing. And then the other
100%.
stuff, you just have to make sure it makes sense, right? Like, are there other people already in that, segment in that community? How many other people are in that community doing the same kind of business? It's the same sort of analysis you do when you're thinking about starting any kind of
Right.
business.
Yeah, you have to, you should contact your competitors. One term, if you want to use this, if you're researching on your own, say, if you're just calling cold, right? You're just contacting a brand. Who is your franchise avatar? They know nothing about you. Maybe you're just calling. You got an intro. Who's your franchise? Who's the ideal fit for this type of business? You may check off every box, but they'll come back and say, and also you need 100 liquid and 250 net worth. Well, that may be a stretch. Well, that alone could really suffocate your business. Could you fudge the numbers? Technically, yes. But where is that going to end up when, you're up and running in the business and you run out of funds? Was it the franchisor? Did you run out of funding? So they're going to have certain requirements. We get those requirements. We're crystal clear. But if you're calling cold and you just say, hey, I want more information, who's your ideal franchisee or avatar? They're going to list financial requirements and role requirements. That alone is a good starting point if you should have that second conversation or not, or maybe revisit later on when maybe you have sufficient funds. So this is a great conversation, and I encourage everyone to pick up the book. And if you're a franchisor, hit up David. You have the website. We're going to put all that in the show notes. So everyone,
if you buy it on Amazon, make sure it's the 2025 release, because there are some copies of the 2015 one that people are trying to resell, so it's still up there. Just make sure it's the new. The new one has a big crest on it that says second edition, and it's available now in paperback and Kindle.
Awesome. As we're finalizing the show, any last piece of advice to got a lot of corporate executives, a lot of individuals looking to invest in their first business, whatever it's a resale, a startup, or a franchise. Any last parting piece of advice that maybe we didn't discuss?
Yeah, you can consume all kinds of content about small business, and you can convince yourself with enough content that one thing is better than the other. What I would say is that in any business, any small business, the owner is at the center of everything. And so what is really important is to do an analysis of your own skills, knowledge, and expertise, and figure out what you are good at and what things you can do to improve a business. And I think whether you start a business, buy a business, or engage in a franchise, there's got to be a fit between what that business is and the way that it helps clients and customers, and the skill set and knowledge that you have. Because you can either get into something you know nothing about, and then you're going to be a student and you're going to be learning and you're always, going to be sort of a little bit behind the curve, or you can get involved with something where you already know that you can bring potentially a competitive advantage to your business because of your background and expertise. So take a good long look at your experience and what you've been doing and what you know, and try to figure out a way to leverage your own personal experience into whatever business, endeavor that you try to get into.
Perfect. That's exactly it. Do the self-audit. If I were to add one thing, which I see is a consistent issue, get your finances in order. I'm not saying, double your savings, but just get them in order. What's the value of your home? What's the mortgage? Where are your investments? Are they in retirement or not? I see so many people have no idea, what their finances look like. So get that in order, along with what are your monthly expenses? If I were to leave my job, who's paying my mortgage and my student loans and everything else? Does my spouse or partner, are they working? Are they bringing in income? Get your expenses, get your net, what you're bringing home. What are your investments, house and other real estate properties look like? That alone is a great exercise, which I update on a monthly basis personally. I have an Excel spreadsheet. So I encourage everyone to start there. And maybe you don't know if the timing isn't right. You can, work with someone like David, work with someone like myself. We can put you in front of a funding company. They'll do a free analysis for you, just giving you high level what's available. They may come back and say, we may agree, franchising is great. Owning a resale or a non-franchise business is perfect, but got to get that credit score up a little bit and maybe a little bit more in savings. Why don't we talk in 6 to 12 months, get those numbers back up? That's okay. That's progress. Sometimes you're mentally there, but financially not, or maybe it's a startup and it has much lower investment. Keeping in mind, maybe it'll take a little bit more time to ramp up and you're okay with it. Then you have something to compare it to. So definitely do that self-audit, get the financials. We can definitely spend a whole show on that, but I think that's the basics. Don't look for the sexy businesses on Biz Buy Sell or the franchises. Just do an internal audit and let the family know and make sure everyone's on the same page. A lot less family drama. That's the most important stuff. Family, let the family know. Don't buy a business and let your spouse know after the fact. That'll save a few marriages right there alone. So, but David, it was a pleasure. We could definitely be talking for hours. Looking forward. I think, this is, I believe, number 5. So we'll do an annual show. You have quite a few books out there and topics that we can discuss. So I think we'll keep this to an annual thing, if that's cool. I really enjoy our conversations. I learn a lot, and we'll even link some of the previous episodes, especially the exit strategy planning that we talked about.
Sure.
It was only, I think that was about 2 or 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, but we'll link that to the show. And anything you need, David's your guy. Highly recommend him, and apparently other franchise companies do as well. I appreciate you coming on, and we'll definitely talk soon.
Awesome. And don't forget, if you own a business, howtosellmyownbusiness.com. You can download this one for free. Give you an idea of what you're going to be involved with if you decide to sell one day.
I wish I had that book when I sold last, but hey, next one. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn how to make the transition from corporate to owning your franchise, join Giuseppe on the next episode. You can also follow on all social media platforms and achieve financial and time freedom today.